All right, so it's another day to talk about business and cloud and technology. So this is another continuation of the training series that I'm into right now with the DevSecOps Dojo. So if you are out in the DevSecOps Dojo, hello and thank you for joining us. And if you are not part of the DevSecOps Dojo, then also hello and thank you for joining us. I will be doing a few more, I guess, trainings in general out in the open these days. When the DevSecOps Dojo began, we had this goal of building our own cloud as a way of teaching cloud. So what better way to learn how cloud works than to build a cloud all the way from ground up? And so we did that, and now that we have our cloud, we are learning how to drive value from our cloud, because it's one thing to learn technical skills so that you can do technical things and all kinds of cool stuff. But it's another thing to know how to translate those skills into income, whether it's starting a company or getting a job, or if you work at a company or have been running a company, whatever. Maybe you're trying to figure out how to just work with automated cash flow in general, just because one of the things about cloud is generally associated with what are referred to as continuous technologies. The thing about continuous technologies is they work while you sleep. So if you're working in cloud in general, chances are you're working with technologies that work while you sleep. And so if you are trying to figure out how to build cloud types of technologies, chances are that you probably deal with people buying things, whether you're paying attention to them buying in that exact moment or not. People, will be buying at night or during the day whenever people feel like it, because if you're buying a cloud product, it's like if you go over to Amazon.com, Amazon.com is cloud hosted. And so somehow someone has to be able to have the Amazon website up and running and afford the Amazon website and then put e-commerce items on there, and that's a cloud. And then in, say, like Amazon, you can go and buy all these different things, but no one actually has to sit there and, you don't have a cash register on Amazon.com. There's no cashier, nothing like that. You just go to the website and you do your stuff, and it just works. And so Amazon's just one of many examples of a automated cloud-based company, so much so that Amazon also has the ability for you to go to AWS and build a cloud and then automate your own stuff. So Amazon is all about the whole idea of automating cash flow. So what I'm talking about, it's nothing new. It's nothing that nobody's ever heard of or seen before. It's stuff that the bigger companies do. And if you've never worked at one of those types of companies, I'm just sharing how that works. So cloud economics. If you want to make money with your cloud skills, and you're going from like, okay, maybe you were trying to get certifications or trying to learn and all that stuff, but you're going to go make money now. I'm going to be taking the approach from where we've been with the DevSecOps Dojo, where since we built a cloud, okay, so we're going to put up the first question of the session. Let's add a question mark to that. So the DevSecOps Dojo and its members, we built our cloud. I've talked about that enough times already, so we're going to continue on just because for anyone who's unfamiliar with that cloud, it's the underground Nexus cloud. So it's a copy-paste data center. We built a cloud that you pretty much copy-paste it, and it builds itself wherever you're trying to host our cloud. And now that we're, as a dojo, I'm teaching people how these mechanisms work, and we want to know how does our cloud make money. One reason why, and I'm going to ask the next question, why do we tend to teach with Raspberry Pis or recommend learning on your own? home lab in general. So this is a really big question, and this is a lot of what drives why are we talking about cloud economics right now. And if the DevSecOps Dojo, I tend to recommend, oh yeah, you can just build it on a Raspberry Pi, or you can use Docker Desktop. Oh, you don't have to use AWS. Oh, you don't have to use Azure, but you can if you want to. Why is it that I talk about it that way? It's because of cloud costs. If you have, say, a Raspberry Pi, it does not have monthly bills. You could rent a Raspberry Pi, I guess, but that wouldn't make much sense. The thing about a Raspberry Pi is it just doesn't have monthly bills and it's low cost. So if someone is trying to learn cloud, I guess the takeaway from this, and this time we're not going to ask a question, is I'm going to say that it's not the best idea for beginners to learn cloud in the public cloud without basically like expensive assistance. So it's not to say that you shouldn't go learn how to build cloud in AWS, or you shouldn't go use Linode. And you can use YouTube videos and things like that, but the challenge when you're working as a beginner with cloud, this is my opinion, let me tell you why. Why is it not the best idea for a beginner to be like, I'm just going to go learn cloud for the first time, I've never touched it before? It's because if you've never dealt with cloud before, you're going to get surprise costs. So surprise costs very much so can surprise beginners. In a lot of ways, if you have taken the time to understand cloud economics but haven't yet dug deeper into the technical aspects of cloud, I still don't necessarily think of someone who has started to understand the economics of cloud at all. You're not a beginner. Even if you don't know the technical side of cloud yet, if you know how cloud billing works and cloud pricing structures work and what's going to cost more money when you're trying to build cloud, why does this matter? When we're trying to make money, why does this matter? Let's ask that question. So we have one more question. So why does it matter? Why does it matter to know how cloud costs work? There's a lot of reasons why it matters that we have an understanding of how cloud costs work. Just because if we do understand cloud costs, there's obvious benefits to where understanding anything, knowledge is power, which means that if you understand something, you can use it more. Of course, that's a little more on the obvious side. But one of the reasons why it's important to know how cloud costs work is because we can't make profit if we don't understand how budgets work. And this is a little bit of a blanket statement that also might sound a little obvious, but even if you're not the person who is the budget keeper and a person who runs a budget, you are probably working for someone who does have to care about the budget. And ultimately, this is your gateway to approvals. And so technical people, So technical folks who can talk budget are able to get more approvals at companies. Now that's if you're working at a company. Alternatively, if you're running the company or you're building the company, then it's just, if you're trying to build a budget, You just need to understand, like, how are you going to build profit? Because margins exist. We have to understand our margins. We have to understand our profit margins, all that good stuff. And oftentimes, when folks are wondering, like, how do I price my cloud solution? Whether you're trying to start a company or whether you're even just a developer and you have the budget holder doesn't necessarily know how, all the ins and outs of cloud and stuff like that. What are those things? What do they cost? So I want to kind of start talking a little bit about some basics of cloud economics in terms of what are some things that tend to get billed for folks who already know a lot about cloud and cloud billing and cloud resources. And if you've gotten like a good 3, 4, 5 months of cloud bills, this is probably nothing all that new. But if you're one of those who's newer to cloud, or you've been thinking about, should I build in the cloud, or can I afford to build in the cloud? I hear it's expensive. It can be. I think what makes cloud expensive is just not understanding how to build a budget for it and not quite understanding what all is going to cost. I think it's really easy to look at the hourly rates for cloud. So if you look at the hourly rates for cloud, sometimes it'll be like, this thing costs 1 cent an hour. This thing costs 30 cents an hour. And we might not necessarily sit there and think like, oh, that 1 cent an hour is going to add up. It doesn't. It sounds like 1 cent an hour, which, okay, so let's start with that. So let's start with cloud tends to bill by the hour. So how do cloud environments tend to bill? So how do the bills work? Let's talk about the things that you kind of have to gauge or have a general understanding of if you're trying to get in the cloud. We're going to be doing a lot of these sessions, so after I do these, I'll go back and look at comments. So if there's any specific questions that folks have about certain things, I'll come back and look at that a little later. But for now, I want to get into this idea of how do cloud environments tend to bill. So first and foremost, most are charged something on an hourly, at some kind of hourly rate. So you'll see various hourly rates for various things when working in cloud. So if you're on AWS or Azure or DigitalOcean or Linode, you'll notice that sometimes they'll say that something costs, say, $5 a month, but then if you start setting it up, all of a sudden you'll notice that like every day that cost will go up a little bit. And oftentimes, if something in a cloud environment says that it costs $5 a month, it doesn't charge you for all 30, like, I mean, I don't know, it might not be $30, but it doesn't charge you for whatever the amount for your monthly cloud. So let's say that it says it's $5 a month for this cloud. If you're just like, okay, I'm going to just spin up this cloud node, this cloud server, and start using it, it's not going to charge you $5 right away. It's going to basically say that whatever hourly rate after 730 hours, more or less, is going to be, say, $5. So at a high level, then we'll just say that there are roughly 730 hours in a month. Let's just kind of start there. 730 hours a month. Let's start with that. So if you see something that says this is a $5 node, so if we have like a $5 cloud server or something along those lines, generally speaking, it's trying to express that after about 730 hours, your estimated cost will accrue to be about $5, which then that can be confusing. It can be very confusing. And some services, depending on the service you use, might actually give you a fixed cost. And so this is where, if you're trying to plan, say, profit margins, and you're trying to price a cloud product, this is where it gets quite confusing, because let's say that you add backups. Maybe what you didn't pay attention to or didn't notice, or maybe you tell someone else like, oh, we need to make sure that we back up XYZ server. We might run into a scenario where it's $20 a month for backups, which now for 730 hours in a month, we're no longer at $5. All of a sudden, we have ended up at $25. So, if we are thinking about how cloud works, then the costs and services, they add up with various additional features, where oftentimes when you choose a cloud, or you're buying a cloud server, renting a cloud node, whatever that may be, whether it's Kubernetes or a droplet or whatever that's going to be, then as soon as we start adding things, then okay, so maybe we added $20 there, and so we're going to then say, what if we want to add something else like storage? It could be that maybe we need more storage. So maybe we add another $10 a month for storage, for volume storage. And now we're getting up there. Still nothing crazy. But then all of a sudden, one of the things that we run into is maybe that $5 server, that $5 cloud server, maybe it didn't really have the resources that we needed to take care of customers. And so this is where cloud resources start to get people, is now we're at like $35. And maybe you just got this server, and if you're running a company, please have backups, please. And if we don't know that those backups are going to cost us money, you're going to have to look up based on your cloud provider. So let me just emphasize this. I want to keep this lesson agnostic, so I'm not going to talk DigitalOcean, I'm not going to talk Linode or AWS or Azure. We're going to talk cloud. I don't care what cloud page you go to. What I will say is that all cloud providers have their... I mean, this is probably stating the obvious. So this is where the cloud and trying to decide like which cloud provider should I work with can become a little bit of a bear, especially if cost becomes a decision factor in like, oh, well, we really wanted AWS, but we went with Linode, even though I'm not a big fan of Linode. Or maybe you're not a big fan of AWS and you love Linode, and Linode happened to be cheaper. But sometimes you might end up choosing the provider that is more cost effective, even if it's not necessarily like the provider that you wanted to go with, because we can keep going into this. So let's say that all of a sudden we need to scale, right? We need to scale up our little cloud environment. It's $35 so far, but we're not done. We're going to scale our server now. Let's say that this server only had, for now, let's just say that this was on 1 core and 12 megabytes of RAM. So let's outline this for a moment. Let's say that for $5, we were very specifically getting 1 CPU core and 512 megabytes of RAM. Mind you, just because you're paying for 1 CPU core, cloud costs get even more confusing. So you might have some different kinds of options where you might have not just a CPU core, but it might be a shared CPU core, which is a way that they drive their cost down. So when you're getting a really low-cost cloud server, you might be getting, say, 1 shared CPU core, not even a dedicated CPU core, which then that can be a little confusing. So let's say that, like, okay, well, we were building an MVP, and maybe it didn't even have enough power for our MVP, for our minimum viable product, and maybe we really do need just a little more power. So now all of a sudden we've gone up to let's give ourselves $5 because we needed to get more resources. So now this is just getting a little bigger, right? It's getting a little fatter. Now we're going to add 40 bucks to this $35. So now we were paying $35 a month just to test. And now we're like, well, I'm going to start building an MVP. Well, okay. Now it's $75 a month. That's not too bad yet. That's not too bad yet. Where we have to understand how much does the cloud cost so that we can afford to have customers. We might sit here and think to ourselves, okay, well, maybe I got this product, this cloud app, it's working in here, it's working for $75 a month, and maybe I'm ready to start enrolling users. So you start enrolling users, right? And it's working great. You've got 10 users in there. They're doing some stuff. Maybe now you have 20 users in there. And then all of a sudden it starts crashing and gets a little slow, and you start finding that you're exceeding the limits of your cloud server. Now all of a sudden you have two options. You either need to load balance your cloud server, or maybe you can scale it up, but if you already have customers on there, then you're probably going to have to load balance that server. And maybe you try to figure out, like, well, if I'm going to load balance it, I need to try to get a bang for my buck, so maybe I'm going to load balance to something a little beefier. So you're going to get a second cloud server, and this first cloud server is going to become a development server now. It's no longer going to be where the customers access this, because you're getting too many customers, and maybe a little money's coming in now. So you're like, okay, well, now I need to figure out how much cloud can I afford next, and how many customers can I get? Because maybe, let's say that for $75 a month, maybe your app, and I don't know what your app is, it could be any app. It could be a really intensive data science app that is really resource intensive, or it could be something that's pretty light. But on 4 cores and 8 gigabytes of RAM, maybe what you do now is you start by making this no longer shared, and you get into running dedicated cores. But now your cloud cost is going to go up tremendously. Now it's going to go up by like 50 bucks. So we're going to say that now we are at $95 a month, just because we really needed to have a little more stability on this one system. We made a little bit of money, and we gotta take care of these users and give them a little more oomph while we're trying to now pump the brakes to load balance. So now it's load balancing time. So our cost goes up 50 bucks. So now all of a sudden it's costing us about $125, but wait for it. We've been getting a lot of data usage from our users, and we don't really have that much data that we can transfer in our cloud, and transferring data costs a lot of money. So maybe it's costing us a lot of money just to manage those users still, and we still haven't finished load balancing them. They've just been using the environment, using the app, and maybe they've liked the app and it's working just fine for them. And we still haven't even been able to try to set up a way to add more users yet. We're just trying to accommodate 20 users. So let me just outline this, that we are still trying to accommodate 20 users. So now we're still trying to accommodate 20 users on our app, and we're starting to get data rate overages. So let's say that in this case we get a surprise bill. We get our first ever overage bill, right? We've never had an overage bill before, but we maybe get a little surprised that all of a sudden we received $150 in unexpected overages. One random month. And that month, well, now that we've had this unexpected overage, this is where we start to see cloud cost anxiety hit companies. Is all of a sudden when someone gets their first unexpected overage or an unexpected outside cost or something that they weren't really planning for, especially if they weren't quite, like, they're still trying to take care of these 20 users and maybe they didn't have a whole lot of budget to really kind of expand this stuff. So maybe put the numbers up a little bigger, but this could be hitting someone pretty hard where they're like, oof, okay. $150 unexpected overages. This is maybe not the most exciting situation. We're a little over budget, and maybe got to make some budget costs and other things. But now we finally have done the math to understand the cost of our load balancing. So now we're going to load balance So now we are going to configure load balancing to both help manage and mitigate the risk of overages, because what a lot of folks might not know is instead of just continuing to make this node bigger, if we start getting additional nodes, most cloud providers will give you more transfer, data transfer capacity for more servers that you add. And sometimes making it bigger will give you some additional transfer usage rate data, whatever. But we want to load balance over to try to get rid of this also. So right now we're kind of stuck with this unexpected overage. So we're going to be sitting here at 275 so far for this month with overages at least. And finally we get load balanced, and what is the cost of our load balanced server? Maybe the cost of that single load balanced server is $360. Maybe we have dedicated CPUs. Maybe we have, like, I don't know, 16 dedicated CPUs, and maybe we have, how much RAM do we need? Maybe we have 32 gigabytes of RAM. I mean, not the most, not the least. It's a good amount, and you can run a company with this, and you can grow it. And then maybe this is our first load balanced node. So we're like, okay, now we're talking. So we are going to load balance this over, and this is going to give us enough transfer to drop this cost here and kind of absorb some of this cost with this. So we're going to remove this 150, and then that we're gonna readjust this number here. So this is going to be $485, I guess. So now we are at about $485 a month, and maybe we can now handle 4 times the user capacity. And so now we are accommodating because we're going to use the other server for development. So we're going to be able to handle many more users, or about. So now we can accommodate 80 more users. And so this kind of comes down to how in the world are we going to understand then, how do we price, say, a $485 cloud environment that we build and deliver services from, how are we going to price that to accommodate 80 users? And this will determine, what is going to be the price of our software. Realistically, if we have an app and we're trying to build a sustainable business, and we got 80 users, and we're like, haha, I pay $485 a month for my cloud, then what we don't want to do is try to charge like $5. Let's just put that out there. We can't charge only $5. This is just going to put us out of business. If we charge $5, then the situation that we're going to run into is that we're going to still have $85 worth of bills to pay, and we're still in debt. Well, we could alternatively, because some of you might be wondering, how do we figure out like a reasonable cost ratio for your app if you know what your cloud bill is? Because I do have a general formula that we're going to take a look at, because before we start talking about how to have something to sell, we have to know how to sell something. And if we don't even know how to price something, we have another problem on our hands to deal with. And then also, let me just make sure that this stream is working, because I feel like I've been doing this for a while. Oh yeah, it seems like it's working. The stream seems to be live. Okay, so yeah, we can keep going. So how are we going to know, like, well, okay, how much am I going to charge for this thing to my 80 users to accommodate them and to be able to grow a sustainable company? Because you also probably have bills to pay that are probably beyond the cloud bills, which means you probably have some, who knows what those bills might be. We have bills on, let me just outline some of this. We have outside bills, could be office rent, office internet, cellular. And it's not uncommon for our total business bills beyond the cloud to be somewhere in the realm, I feel like $3,000 is pretty low. I could be very wrong. Maybe $3,000 is high. I feel like $3,000 to run a business, and then you have your cloud bill, like $485. That's a bargain. Like if you can figure out how to run a company that can ideally make at least $350,000 a year, or like $250,000 a year, and you're only paying $3,500 a month on everything, that's a pretty good deal. But how in the world would we even have a company that's going to pay us like $250,000 a year? And why would we need to pay? Why do we need to make $250,000 a year? Why do we need to make more money? What's the purpose as a business? Like why? Like we have to make more money. If we don't make more money, we suffer, never escaping work. Ever. Money hires help. This is pretty standard, but like if you're working at a company and you're not the one who deals with the bills, if you're not the person who's like a budget holder, I run into this with a lot of people who come from like conventional employment, and then they go and become an entrepreneur, and then they don't charge enough for their services, and they're like, oh, I'm charging $5 for my app. I'm like, why are you charging $5 for your app? Well, I don't want to charge too much. Wait, what? But $5. Oh, hold on. How much is your cloud bill? Well, I don't even know, but $5 seems like a pretty reasonable rate, and I'll get more users someday. I'm like, okay, you'll get more users someday. How many users do you have now? Well, I don't have any users yet. Okay, you don't have any users yet, but you're charging $5. And And then how are you going to get PTO? And they're like, wait, PTO? Well, what's your runway for how many months can you afford rent? Well, I can only afford rent for 3 months, but this is going to work in 3 months. Is this going to work in 3 months? Are you sure this is going to work in 3 months to save your bills so that you're going to survive? You're going to put food on the table. And then you're going to charge $5 for your app. You're going to lose everything you have. You're going to lose the shirt off your back. So I am here to help you not lose the shirt off your back. Yeah, let's just start with this. Don't lose the shirt off your back just because you have you're trying to build a company and all these things. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. It actually is worth charging, even if you have to charge more than maybe what you might be comfortable thinking that you should be charging. Maybe you have to charge $100 per customer. Maybe you have to charge $1,000 per customer for your app. But don't let your pricing be controlled by what you think people should be getting charged. That is a bad idea in the cloud industry. You want to charge based on general costs, and then if you're finding that there are other solutions in the market that are competitive with what you're doing, and they're doing it at a price that you can't compete with, then maybe it might mean to try to compete elsewhere and try to find a market or an industry where you can afford to compete in. And if you're working for a company and you're the engineer and you're trying to get, say, I want to get this new feature approved, but maybe what you don't realize is that the feature you want approved that you want to make for this company would cost the company so much to deliver this service or so much to deliver this thing that you think is the coolest feature ever, that they're just like, no, denied. And you're like, oh, come on, this is the best idea ever. And the technical person resubmits it and they're like, how come no one cares about my code? I work so hard and I make this code and I submitted it out there. And then you just keep, saying that it's just not good enough. Well, it's not necessarily always that your code isn't good enough. It could actually just mean that your company might actually have to lay you off if they approve that, because they wouldn't be able to afford you, and they're always going to choose paying their bills before their staff, because if they can't afford the bills, then they have to lay off all the staff, not just you. Everyone. Everyone has to get laid off. And then they lose the office, and then whoever ran that company or built that company, they just lose the whole company. So you lose a job, but they lose their whole company. They're not going to do that. Someone who's been running a company for a while and you're trying to negotiate this technical thing, oftentimes folks who are technical don't necessarily know what it's like on the other side with the budget holders and the people who build the budgets. And then also those who build the budgets might not necessarily have the technical know-how to navigate some of the costs. So anyways, let's get into this idea of how do we figure out how to price for, let's just say that our bills. Let's say that our total business bills are about $3,500 a month. Let's start there. That's a good starting point, right? So let's just role play this. If our bills are at $3,500 a month, and we know that we have built a cloud my rule of thumb is that if you want to always calculate or test or try to identify what your user limit on your cloud app is. That can be a little complicated. If you're not sure how to figure out how to test that, this kind of goes back to I really do recommend things like testing on a Raspberry Pi, things like that, because you can get an idea how capacity works, and a Raspberry Pi is really strict, so almost anything that's not a Raspberry Pi is a little more forgiving. So if your math is all built around what you can deliver on a Raspberry Pi, then you can almost guarantee that your end result is going to be significantly more flexible. So if you were using, say, like Raspberry Pis for hosting, so what does that look like? Basically like 4 cores, at 2.0 gigahertz, and then about 8 gigabytes RAM. You get a cloud node that's about this powerful. You'll find that a Pi and a cloud node perform pretty similarly in a lot of ways. It's you have to test it. There are different cloud nodes that have different performance rates. But if you're just trying to get some financial math going, start with something like a Raspberry Pi and then make your first sizable footprint for what you're trying to do, you know, like a cloud node that's 4 cores and 8 gigabytes of RAM. And you can probably assume that 80 users on this metric will work in a cloud node. You can make that general assumption, right? So once you've found your user capacity, you need to figure that out. Then ultimately my recommendation is that you should be able to, you know, especially at user capacity, you should be making at least, in my opinion, 4 times the amount of what your monthly bills are, and ultimately even 5 times of what your monthly bills are, because otherwise you're just not going to be able to pay for help, and then that's an easy way to burn out real hard. It's if you're running a company or building a side project or building a side cloud, it's not unusual. Our cloud bills are easily floating around $100,000 a year, and that's low for what we do. How am I supposed to afford $100,000 a year worth of cloud bills if all I make is $100,000 a year? For someone who's not running a company, $100,000 a year sounds like a lot of money until $100,000 a year is your bill. Now, in this case, we pay way more in our monthly bills than this. This is way lower. I wish that my business bills were this low. But anyways, that aside, cloud, it's expensive. Let's 5 times this. So that's going to be like 17,500. I'd recommend target a 5 times goal based on monthly business bills. So once you know your user capacity, then 5 times this, our number is going to be, let me write this down before I have to try to remember it. So let's see, so $17,500 or so. So if we make $17,000, that number might seem high. It's really not as high as you might think. It's easy to end up with like $10,000 a month in bills or $12,000 a month in bills. And the more money you have, you can scale more too. So you start making more money, you can hire for help, you can start to scale your cloud resources, you can expand your infrastructure. I don't like to think of having $17,500 is like, I'm just gonna go buy random stuff. Don't do that. Don't go buy random stuff. Like, reinvest it, please, for the love of whatever. Like, please reinvest this money. Please reinvest something of this. Like, don't just go blow the cash. I meet a lot of people, and the first time they like make decent money, they're like, whoa, and then they go and like spend like all of it in a weekend. Please don't do that. Whatever you do, because then it's not really helping you long term when you're like, oh, I've been having this hard life and I finally made all this money, but don't worry, I spent it in 1 month and now I don't have any money again. We don't want to do that. So let's hold on to the 17,500, but this is most certainly enough to pay for help and scale and grow the company. But more importantly, there's a chance that we might not always have 80 users, and it might also take a while to get to 80 users. And so if we're trying to make sure, let's see what is the general cost of our app then. So we're going to say 17,500 divided by 80. So then this maybe this is a little more of a sophisticated app that we're running. Who knows? I'm going to remove this because the 80 users is actually based on 16 dedicated CPUs, 32 gigabytes of RAM. So let's make the visuals match now, because that was just an example earlier. So let's tighten this example up. So let's just say that we have 16 dedicated cores and 32 gigabytes of RAM. I'll stop moving that around. So that's a pretty beefy cloud node. That's a pretty tanky cloud node that can do quite a bit. You can do quite a bit with that. You can enroll users, you can do different things. And then you also have to manage it, and so it goes back to having to pay for help and things like that. So we're looking at a product pricing for something like that. It might cost us about $220 for whatever that is. Now that might seem like a lot if you're comparing it to like phone apps. This is probably not a phone app. This is probably very much so not a phone app. To give you an idea, I pay for certain services, and some services just cost me like $300 a month. And I pay it because that's just the cost of having to run my company. And if I don't like it, then I guess I don't like it. And the users might be paying $220 a month here, but what is that $220 buying the user? So this is where we have to be able to talk value, because you have to be able to tell someone that your software costs $220 a month. Please charge the money. But how are we going to convince ourselves that we're allowed to charge this kind of cash? Because $220, to some folks, they're like, oh, that's nothing. Okay, great. But to other folks, I might be like, what? I can't just charge $220. I run into this a lot with especially new entrepreneurs. For those of you who've never run a company before, they're like, oh, I can't charge that much. And then they always try to charge less, and then they end up either going out of business or struggling. And then they're like, I'm struggling. I'm like, why aren't you increasing the cost of your services so that you can afford to do business? They're like, I can't do that. And then if someone can't do that and they're struggling, it is what it is. We can't help you. But if you increase the cost of your services, then now we can figure out, okay, so for $220 a month, how many users do I need to now get every single month to be able to pay my cloud bill? Because I still have to get to $3,500 a month. So if we just take $3,500 and divide it by 220, then we are at roughly about like 16 users every single month, at least to break even. So that means that we have to sell at least 16, we have to get at least 16 users on our platform who are paying a monthly rate for us to just basically be broke. Like, to be broke as dirt, right? Now, if you're not charging $220... Wait, I might have done that wrong. No, that's right. If we're not charging the right amount of money, it gets to be very challenging to figure out... Let's see. It's just going to be hard to live. It's really hard to live if you don't know how to get 16 users who are all paying that rate. We do not want to drop that price because it's already hard enough to get our 16 users. So if we try to drop that price, once again, it's very punishing on our life, on our livelihoods, on our lifestyles. We don't want to be punished. So anyways, just charge the money. So now for us to get to the point where we're like living life a little bit, we got to eat. So another $1,000, then really we need to about 21 users a month to afford eating and to kind of like live and everything's, you know, just fine. Now all of a sudden it's like, okay, 21 users, we're not like clawing and hoping and clawing. Now $220, I've sold applications that are just like workshops for like $2,000. So people will buy workshops for $2,000 if the workshop is worth $2,000. If the workshop's not worth $2,000, no one's going to spend $2,000 on a workshop. That's kind of up to the users. There are ways to test that. I'm not getting into how to test what people will consider worth their money. Usually it kind of comes down to like there has to be some sort of tangible outcome that is worth it to an audience. But that's more marketing. I'll get into that another time. I guess it's related to the sales process too. But anyways, like 21 users a month to afford to eat. Because we want to eat. We got to eat. We can't just not eat, please. We got to eat. So that's a journey. Anyone who's ever tried to build a cloud application and then make sure that you understand your profit margins and then understand like how much do you have to make, you'll actually find that it's really tough to keep business bills like as low as this, like $3,500, especially if you have cloud in your bills. And so there are ways to kind of figure out like, well, maybe you downsize other aspects of your life. So maybe you downsize the internet bill since you have a cloud environment anyways, and maybe you get a slower speed since you got a cloud node, or maybe you downsize your living space, or whatever. If you're trying to get off the ground, once you're off the ground, it's easier to make money. After a while, your cloud just kind of sells things on its own. But you gotta get to the point to where you can afford this behemoth, and maybe you do end up where, you know, it costs money. It's hard. It's not necessarily just like a walk in the park to build cloud. So this is just kind of getting into a little bit of cloud economics for how do we, you know, work toward building something that we can sell. And then finally, for this to work, we can automate these sales. Let's see, finding 21 users to sell to can be automated. So let me just put this here. So finding 21 users to sell to can be automated, but you do have to put some human touch to it. It's not simple. Just because it can be automated doesn't mean it's easy. Let's not think that. That's why we're going to just assume that we're going to lose money when learning. Everything I'm teaching, I'm going to start getting into things that cost a lot of money. So for anyone who's learning, be ready to lose a lot of money if you're following me and you want to learn these things. But it's not going to be more expensive than college necessarily. I'm not asking anyone to spend the equivalent of a college degree. But what I'm going to say is if you're going to try some of these things that I'm talking about for automating sales, let me outline why is this also exciting. If you can automate 21 customer sales, you can automate 100 plus sales. That continue selling passively. I don't like the word passive sales because people selling automatically even while you sleep. Now, the reason why this is not passive sales is because it has to be nurtured and measured. It's not passive sales. This is not passive income. It's automated income. There can be some confusion with automation. Automation must be managed. Automation doesn't just magically happen. Automation is a journey. Automation is challenging. There's a lot associated with trying to figure out automation. So it can be a journey. It can take years to learn this, where you're trying to figure out, okay, so I got to understand these moving parts. That's just the billing. That's just the billables, which is why the technical, it's in my opinion easier. Once again, if you just get something like a Raspberry Pi or use Docker Desktop, just I don't know, just get a home lab. Get a home lab to spare. I'm just going to add Raspberry Pi and home labs. Yeah, Raspberry Pi and home labs do not have monthly bills if you're buying the resources. I guess you could rent things, and I guess if your internet cost is kind of high and things like that, and your power costs, so you'll get some of those. But for the most part, the infrastructure, like the servers, you're not going to be paying transfer costs to have your Raspberry Pi talk to your laptop or a desktop in your house. That's just not going to happen. You don't have to understand overages or surprise costs or why does the storage cost money. Oh, you try to see how much it costs to get 20 terabytes of storage in the cloud. 20 terabytes of storage in the cloud is going to be expensive. So one of the things, because we do run the DevSecOps Dojo, and I build these things, I test these things, and I practice what I preach. So while we built the cloud, we have our cloud running. We have the underground Nexus running across, this is now 5 locations, and what you're seeing right here is basically the underground Nexus running a 24/7 SOC stream that also plays music, and this is built over a mesh. So as an example of, what are the things to make this one stream not have punishing costs, because it could have punishing costs, things that we've done to reduce the cost, because if you're in the DevSecOps Dojo, you've been following this stuff before we even built this, and you also know that how the underground Nexus works, what the underground Nexus looks like under the hood. Some of our members have built their own continuous apps and technologies with the underground Nexus, but this one in particular might not look like it, but it's running from 3 separate systems across 3 separate locations entirely. And it's using a combination of multiple public clouds at the same time. It's using elements of AWS, it's using elements of DigitalOcean, it's using elements of Azure, and it's also using elements of Google Cloud Platforms, Kubernetes, and at the same time it's running multiple Docker layers, and the music that it plays doesn't even live on the host that's running the stream itself. The files don't live there because it costs money for the files to live in that cloud location. So we have to find other ways to have different parts of the services route throughout the cloud so that the cloud's not costing us insane amounts of money just to have this thing where we do have Randall now is running cybersecurity challenges weekly. So we now have a new cybersecurity challenge for this week. There'll be a new one next week. Check in with these every single week. And Jordan is building a printer pipeline. Jordan actually manages the music aspect of the stream, and Randall manages the SOC aspect of the stream. And so this stream also is run by 4 people behind the scenes. Might not look like it, but you also have to be able to afford labor. Let me just outline that, is that labor is not free. Let's just say that labor is maybe the most painful. So if you are trying to say, oh, I need to be able to have 3 people on this besides myself all the time, those people have to somehow magically be available. And even if they think it sounds fun or cool or like your idea, it doesn't really matter how cool your idea is if people got to eat. Because if people got to eat and you're not the one who's providing the hand that feeds and making sure that people are taken care of, they just don't have the availability to do labor for you. And it's also illegal to try to expect people to do free labor. Don't try to tell people to do free labor. That's actually against the law. So don't do that either. It's against the law. Don't do it. Pay people or don't let them help you. One of the two. A lot of folks will wonder like, I'll do free work for you. I'll do free work for you. And you'll probably notice that I'm very resistant to that. Number of reasons. And why I tend to be more like, you can do free work for yourself. You can come to Dojo and you can build your own company, but you ain't going to work for me for free. Work for yourself. So as a result, I will say this to all of you and everyone, because I don't believe in free labor, is we only do like commissions. And a lot of people just aren't really the types to enjoy commissions. So we have that sort of lifestyle. Whether people understand this or not, most of our team pretty much lives and dies purely on commission. So we're like a team of specialists who just are like, I'm good enough at this. I can make my own money. It's not a big deal. But let's say you want to get labor. Well, maybe that's a whole nother thing, because we're getting past the cloud costs. We're getting to another discussion. Because some folks I pay full time too. It's complicated. So anyways, we're gonna wrap it up for now. And for those who are wondering, like, how can I learn this stuff? That's right. What I do want to say though is, even though labor is not free, you can use all of our resources and start your own company. This is what I want to emphasize. So even though labor, well, it's not necessarily free, because working for yourself, there's a price associated with working for yourself too. Maybe you pay in the cost of stress, anxiety, and the pressure that comes with it, and your time. So time is money too. But even though I'm not going to have someone work for me for free, ain't gonna happen, you can come to the dojo and start your own company and work for yourself for free. And that's free. I'm not going to charge you to join the dojo. I don't charge for any of the tools that we build in the dojo. If you wanted to help and create additions to the underground Nexus, which is the cloud that we built, the underground Nexus, you can get an entire copy-paste data center for free, which means that you have a data center without paying a penny to me or a penny to anyone, and I don't need to make money off of you for you to go start your company. You can go start your company for free today. And if you want to try this on, say, like a Raspberry Pi or a Jetson or something along those lines, it's, once again, it kind of goes back to, you can get a Raspberry Pi and then use, say, like the underground Nexus and get used to the technical. Don't get used to the technical where you're going to get billed. And then when you're ready, then the underground Nexus makes it so that you can then go scale up to whatever you want. And whatever you want to pay for, that's up to you. If you're going to pay for AWS or DigitalOcean, or maybe you just decide to just forever just run local servers, it doesn't really matter what you choose. The ultimate point of that is that you don't even need me. You don't even need to join Dojo to get the underground Nexus. The underground Nexus, you don't have to join anything. You can just use it. So no one has to join anything. But if you really want to be part of the community and you want to check out what we do, then I would recommend checking out the DevSecOps Dojo, where you can come talk to us. It doesn't cost anything. It used to cost money, but we have done well enough to just fund a whole bunch of things for folks, and so much so that you can start your own cloud products without paying us, without paying AWS, without paying whoever these people are and stuff like that. So separate your process of learning technical from billing. Learn billing after you know the technical. They're like two unique skills, and they can both be a little overwhelming, especially when you're comparing things. So thanks for listening. Thanks for checking this out. I guess I'll see if there were any questions in any of the channels real quick. I'm not seeing any questions, but I'm seeing a lot. Hello, everyone. So thank you for dropping in and saying hello. Let's see. Maybe make sure I'm not missing any questions. And then if I'm missing a question, I'll try to answer them probably in the next session. I'm going to be doing these